One of my favorite cities is Chennai, Madras as it was known in those good old days. I started my career working in Chennai and it's always been special for me, which is why I was delighted when I got back there not so long ago. And on this trip, I also went back to Mahabalipuram. And here's something that I learned from that trip. Hello and welcome to another edition of Chai with Pi, our weekly series of videos where I try and share simple lessons and stories that can help each of us become just a little bit better. Have you been to Mahabalipuram? It's quite a place, and seeing the majestic shore temple out there just makes you marvel at the beauty of that architecture, and really something which has now become a World Heritage Site but was built all those years ago, sometime in the 7th or 8th century. On this trip, as we noticed the ruins and we saw some of the temples and the rock architecture, we noticed something interesting. On some of the rocks were these square holes that had been kind of etched into the stone. And you could see it's almost as if, someone had kind of made those little craters on those rocks. And just as our curiosity was being aroused, our kind guide told us something interesting. He explained to us that in the 7th and 8th century, there was no electricity and there were none of these big stone crushers and cutting machines. So how did the sculptors manage to break those rocks, those large stones, into those bits of architecture that they really wanted? And here's how they did it. What they would do is to make these little holes on the rocks and push in some wooden pegs and then water it. And over time, that water would expand, and through the pressure of that, the rock would crack and become a smaller bit. And as I thought of it, it brought a smile on my face, and I think it taught me 2 or 3 lessons that I thought I must share with you. Here's the first one. Very often, I think we look at something marvelous and we don't always think about what might have gone in behind it. We see a work of art, we see some great execution in the marketplace, we see a fantastic product, we see great customer service. We don't always pause to think about what might have happened. And that happened with us. We saw the lovely shore temple, but didn't really think about how on earth did they manage to work with those stones at a time when there were no machines, no electricity. Good idea for all of us to think of the backstory. Lesson number 2. Sometimes we can all worry about not having enough resources. Don't do that. Just try and ask yourself what is in your control and how can you come up with a creative way to solve a problem. And that's what I'm guessing the sculptors did all those years ago. They didn't have power, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have those machines. But hey, they had their minds and they came up with ingenious ways of cracking rocks and working with those stones to actually make those fantastic looking sculptures. Those were the 2 big lessons I learned, but maybe, just maybe, there's a third one, which is this. I don't think we would have understood or heard the story if we didn't have a guide on that trip. Next time you go visiting a place, good idea to get yourself a guide. It's worth the extra 100, 200, 500 rupees that you might pay, because a guide will bring some of his or her expertise to play and tell you those little stories which will make your visit even more memorable. Maybe there's a bigger message out there for all of us. We all need to learn to turn to other people for help. If you want to learn yoga, get a teacher. If you want to learn to play a sport, get a coach. If you want to learn art, get a teacher. And I think just having a guide, having a coach, having someone who can help us can make our lives just a little bit more interesting. Those then were my 3 lessons. Tell me if you are the kind of person who uses a guide when you go out. And yes, what's been your experience with guides or coaches? That's all in this week's edition of Chai with Pi. Until next time, enjoy your chai.